Hello, everyone. I'm Harpreet Singh, welcoming you to the Future of Work Pioneers podcast. Today, we are speaking with Aadesh Goyal, the Global CHRO at Tata Communications. He's also the Chief Ethics Officer of the company. He's currently the Chairman of the Board of Tata Communications Payment Solutions Limited and a Director on the Board of Tata Communications Transformation Services Limited. Prior to assuming his current roles in 2010, Aadesh was the chairman and CEO of PeopleStrong HR Services and was part of the startup team of Aricent Hughes Software Systems, where he spent 16 years in a variety of positions, including global head of HR and CEO of its BPO Business. Aadesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So good to be here with you, Harpreet, today.
So, Aadesh, before we jump into your background, I would love to understand the Tata organization, and it's a conglomerate with many parts, and where you sit, and also help us understand the scale that you're dealing with.
Absolutely, would love to talk about that. So Tata Group is about 150 years old. Today, there are about 100 independent companies in Tata Group, and they are all owned in part, when I say in part, in terms of some of the shareholding by Tata Sons. So Tata Sons is a holding company of all of these 100 companies, and many of these companies are actually public companies, and they are very large companies just independently. And 2/3 of Tata Sons is actually owned by various charitable trusts of Tata, which was started more than 100 years ago. So it's really large. About 3/4 of the revenue comes from outside India. There are about 700,000 employees, and the last 10 years that I've been here, I can feel what Tata is known for: leadership with trust. It's almost a revered brand in India and the world over.
That's wonderful. And tell us about Tata Communications. How large is that organization?
So Tata Communications is a global company. We have customers in over 200 countries. One way of describing is that the global network that we have, which is one of the world's largest undersea cable systems, covers over 99% of the world's GDP. And, we have about 18,000 employees. Let me change that. We have about 12,500 employees, and in about 40 countries of about 45 nationalities. And every telco that is there in the globe is a customer for us. And in addition, we have about 5,000 enterprise customers.
And what are the main service offerings?
So we are basically a leader in digital ecosystem enabler, and we do that through various network-related products, through cloud services, through security services, mobility, and collaboration.
Wonderful. So Aadesh, let's get into your background. Tell us, what got you interested in the HR field, and any defining moments that kind of prompted you in this direction?
So, I grew up in a small town, right? It's in Rajasthan. It's called Khetri. There's a very large copper mine there. And both my parents were born in Uttarakhand in Dehradun. And my father was a mining engineer, landed up there for work. And we went there when I was 1 year born, 1 year, right? We went there when I was 1 year old and finished my schooling there and just went to BITS Pilani, which happened to be in the same district where Khetri was, called Junjunu. So living there, I was very fortunate to live there and grow up there because there were people from all over the country living there, every single state. So you learn the traditions of that, you develop comfort and appreciation for different parts of India and different people and tradition and food, right? Other than, food outside of India, actually I had everything to do with all of India living there in that small town, right? And you learn to love the diversity. We even had people from France and Canada and Russia and many other countries there because they were doing a lot of technology transfer. So we grew up, some of our friends are children of these people. So, that was very fortunate. And then BITS Pilani was where you learned, how to be fully independent because there was no attendance. You didn't have to attend classes and you were completely in a different way. So, the childhood was very good, learning the value of diversity and discipline, hard work, honesty, and how to be independent. And when I graduated, I only knew two things, right? That I didn't want to go into sales and I didn't want to become a computer programmer. I remember in the mid 80s, programming was the in thing, and people from BITS and IITs, it doesn't matter what you studied, you were being hired for being a programmer because you had done some programming, right? Every student there. And I said, I'm not going to do that. Actually, I had no clue what I wanted to do, right? So I saw this ad for an organization called Center for Development of Telematics, and they were looking for trainees in the project management area. The ad looked really nice to me. I had no clue about the company, so I just applied. And after a day-long 7-step interview process, got hired. And when I joined, I figured out that my boss was going to be a guy called Sam Petroda. I had never heard of him. And he was the advisor, and the CEO of the company was a very decorated, well-known guy from the telecommunications industry in India called G.B. Mimamsi. And actually working with these two people, I still thank God that I got that opportunity. And I did that for about 3 years. And then, one thing, they kept offering me different roles. I kept doing it. So the next role was in HR. It was more like a business HR partner role, even though it was not called by that name in the in the late 80s. And then I got into what I would say is, technology transfer and managing relationships with the suppliers, which means people who are manufacturing your stuff and the ancillary industry. And it was a bit of a corporate marketing role. And then I got back into HR and, what is today called as organization development, an HR COE role. And I spent 7 years there. It was just amazing. Huge amount of friendships. I'm still in touch with about 150, maybe 200 people from the CDOT days. And some of my best friends are from that time. And then Hughes Software Systems came into India. Two of my friends who were engineers, they interviewed there and they said, hey, we're looking for somebody in HR. So I was actually sick at that time. So they came home. We didn't have telephones at home at that time, right? In India, landlines were so hard to come by. So they came home and said, hey, you're going for interview tomorrow. I said, I'm sick. He said, don't matter, make your CV. And, I just landed up to be for a startup type of a, software center for Hughes Network Systems, which is a part of Hughes Aircraft Company at that time, right, which was owned by General Motors. And one thing led to the next. I was there for 16 years. One of the first few employees. We went public in '99, and during those 16 years, I got an opportunity to do a variety of roles. I've actually never said no to any role that anybody offered me. And that, I think, purely came. So I give a lot of credit to the people who offered these roles and to my luck. So I actually did the CIO role there. I did procurement role there. I did corporate communication role there. I was, like you said, I was the CEO of the BPO, Hughes BPO Business in India. And then I also was the head of engineering there for about 3 years. There was a large team of 3,000, software R&D engineers developing different types of products. And of course, I was the head of HR for a little more than half of my tenure there. So it was more by an accident, and I keep going into away from HR every few years, and then I come back into HR because I feel this is the best role for me because HR has infinite potential. Nobody can define your job properly, and I love that, right? I like to say that wherever I worked, the company defined perhaps 25% of my job, and the rest, as long as you're meeting that, you have the opportunity to define the rest yourself, right? And how can you enable the people? How can you enable the strategy? How can you enable the business of the company? Really excites me. And I love to use technology in any job or assignment that I get.
That's wonderful. So we are all going through a crisis, a pandemic. Uh, what has been the role of leadership when it comes to managing this crisis, and also when you think about the transformation that you've had to make in the current context?
So, as I've heard the stories of how different companies dealt with it over the last 1 year, I've heard only good stories, right? And especially in the industry that we are in, there are several industries that were hit really hard, and they try to do the best for the customers and for their employees. But they face really a lot of challenges, right? We, on the other hand, faced a lot of challenges, but we were not really having problem on the revenue side. So we were able to really do well. Actually, I would say thrive during this time. And out of the 12,500 employees, and we have an extended workforce of about 25,000. These are the employees of our vendors who manage our network, and in a way they're doing managed services in different parts of the world for us. And we went, if I just take the employees, 12,500, we went from 2% primarily working at home to 98% primarily working at home within 2 weeks. And our teams, right, we set up we already had a disaster management type of a team. We had never done work of this type, but, Chennai had floods 2 times, that's really the biggest thing that we had handled. But this was something nobody had ever done. And we quickly set that up, and I got by default the opportunity to really lead the business continuity. And we set up a team of about 30 people, one from each major group. And initially we're having meetings 2 or 3 times a day, trying to solve every problem because we had never dealt with those problems before, right? So you decide everything right there and then it became a daily meeting. And I must say, I'm so proud to be a part of the team that did this Herculean task of really doing, in a way that we didn't drop the ball for any customers. And, if you see from the point of view of learning, about when the pandemic actually happened, at that time, we were doing about 7.5 to 8 days of learning per employee per year. And 90% of that was delivered digitally. So from the point of view of how employees had to learn and how did we have to engage them, we already had a thriving digital infrastructure. And we were able to quickly leverage to say, how do you manage virtually? How do you manage self? How do you manage teams? This and that. And, create pathways for learning. We invited everybody to share their experiences so that all of us can learn from it. We have a vibrant social network. So, looking back, while a lot of the people were saying, this is happening, that is happening, and most of our employees are saying that too, but if you remove the noise, the core was actually still thriving. And so it was a great experience. What we learned during the crisis is that people come together like never before, right? So around February, when we had done the annual engagement survey, our engagement score was 80, which is in the top quartile of engagement among the best employers globally. And when we did a dipstick in April or May, the engagement score was actually 10% higher, and that was shocking, right? And what, as we thought about it, people drop their personal issues when there is a crisis, right? They really get focused on the larger thing, and for me, that was the biggest lesson, that if we can all get inspired about a larger cause or purpose, then the type of force that gets created is quite phenomenal. And I think that's really the job of a leader, of a manager.
Now, along the same lines, we're talking about corporate culture, and building culture is an important role for an HR leader. How do you think about building such culture, and what are the ingredients that you think are important that go into that?
So, amongst all the roles that I do, this part of the role is most nebulous. Very hard to touch, very hard to feel, very hard to put your arms around it and say this is the way it happens, right? But I'll answer this question in the best way possible. I think culture is about what you believe in, what you're inspired about, what you're passionate about, right? So the first thing is to talk about it, right? And if you read about the culture of or the values of any company in the world, they all more or less look the same, right? But how do you give life to it? See, the life to it is really given by actual day-to-day incidents, right? When rubber hits the whole road, what happens, right? So, for example, if you ask any new hire in our company, right, they will say, in my first few days or even during the hiring process, everybody that I talked to was very caring and supportive, right? Now, you start that and then you keep repeating it, right? It is an infinite loop. So I think the one part of culture is how can you inspire people to give something, right? And when you receive something, you feel like giving it more, right? So I think how do you create that cycle that takes a life on its own? So that's one thing. I think the second thing is how do you see, who are the role models, right? And how do you give them life and how do you showcase them, right? So we generally think that, the senior leadership and the CEO of the company have to be the role models. Yeah, that is true. But I think that's not enough. Right? So how do you create role models? So the things that we have done in the past and we continue to do is, say for example, being innovative, being helpful, being a good problem solver, being someone who is really caring. So what we have done and what we continue to do is we say that okay, let's do a company-wide poll, and every employee can select one person saying this is a person who is a problem solver, this is a person who is customer centric, and they choose any person of their choice and they say why, and then the person gets the email that someone, and we don't say who said it, someone said you are great at problem solving and here's the reason. So how do you catch people doing something right? Then you create this loop and then you say who are the top 25 for every category. So you now have created more role models. Everybody who gets a single vote gets to be a role model, right? And everybody who voted gets to be a person who appreciates it. So this process creates so much positivity and you're able to give life to it, right? I think the third angle to this is the stories, right? Are people having enough story to talk about it, right? In their little groups and teams that, this happened once and this is the way this person handled a customer situation or a crisis situation or an employee emergency situation or something like that. If you're able to create a virtuous circle from this, it becomes like a bit of a DNA, a self-working machine core. I think that's how I believe culture is created.
This episode is brought to you by Experfy. Incubated in Harvard Innovation Lab, Experfy provides custom future of work solutions, such as private talent clouds and skill taxonomies. Experfy differentiates itself by using subject matter experts to pre-vet and pipeline candidates for AI and high-end technology skills. However, Experfy Talent Cloud Platform is skill agnostic and can be licensed to build custom talent clouds for any and all skills. In a different use case, enterprises interested in employee intermobility can license the Experfy platform to create an internal gigs marketplace where interested employees can be algorithmically matched to projects, gamifying their learning experience. Visit www.experfy.com for more information.
Adesh, you've created Tata Communications Learning Academy to upskill your employees. Give us a sense of what has worked and what has not worked and what the program looks like.
So, since your theme is future of work, let me give a bit of a, preamble on that, and then I'll come to the Tata Communications Learning Academy. So given all these wonderful new technologies that have, come and become popular in the last 4, 5, 6 years, I think what HR can do for the business and for the people is exponentially higher than what it was possible even 10 years ago, right? So I think HR needs to be a platform strategy, right? HR strategy needs to be a platform strategy. And what I mean by that is that ultimately, if you see, employees have certain needs, managers have certain needs, leaders have certain needs, business has certain needs. How can you create a platform to serve those needs, right? And when I say platform, I mean an intelligent platform that can customize things, that can learn stuff and keep making it better for people over time. It is available like self-service from anywhere to be used by anybody and at any given time, right? And there is instant gratification. You don't have to wait for approval, right? So ultimately, I think HR managers need to become product managers. How do you create a great product that will serve the needs of all of these people, including the business strategy, right? And nobody is going to give these requirements to you in a document, right? You have to figure it out and develop the product, right? And you have to keep making it better over time, right? You have to market. If the product doesn't work, then basically you did something wrong. The customer can't be wrong. So my most favorite, one of my most favorite things is this document written by, it's called The Good Product Manager and the Bad Product Manager, right? And it's written by Ben Horowitz. And, this is something that we have been using at Tata Communications for HR, right? And in line with this, when we were talking 5 years ago about what our future, business looks like, everybody, all the leaders are saying we're going to use and need new skills. But obviously, nobody knew what skills, when, in what quantity, at what location, right? And as you keep peeling this, answers become even more vague. So we said, hey, how do we solve this problem? So we decided that, that was one of the first platforms that we built. We used a prototype on SharePoint and we created the Tata Communications Learning Academy. And we were trying to solve only 3-4 problems, right? And as we launched it, even with a somewhat murky user interface, because it was a prototype, we saw people using it. And in 6 months, it became hard for us to really carry on operations. So we had to quickly scale. So we kept on scaling. And basically today, our platform is such that anybody can learn anything at any given time and they can keep changing it, right? So based on your current role, it keeps sending you alerts on what might be a good learning for you. And these are in bits and bytes, right? And it also tells you bigger programs, which could be certifications, right, which you could do. And what we have seen is people have lapped it up, right? The second thing it does is it enables you to choose a destination career, that somebody that you want to aspire to be, and then it starts sending alerts based on that, right? So you're not only skilling for the current job, but also you're skilling for the future, right? Or you could follow somebody and say, what is this person learning? And without violating any of the privacy, etc., we are able to give that type of things to that. So what we have seen is, with this strategy, the average training per employee per year has more than doubled in 4 years. And about 2/3 of our learning is self-learning. Nobody is asking the employees to learn. They're just learning on their own. And about 1/3 is what the managers or the leaders are, asking or suggesting their teams to learn. So this, I think, needs to scale more. And, we are now working on the next generation of that. And, if you're interested, I can even talk about that.
You mentioned in the past that the future work will be virtual. So can you talk about the elements that you see constituting the digital strategy of a virtual workspace?
Absolutely. So, like you said, we thought the future of work is going to happen in future, but it's already here, right? And now we have to scramble. So I think there are 5 elements of what the future of work strategy is. I think the first one is, who is your workforce? I believe the workforce will be of 4 types. One is full-time employees. The second is part-time employees. There are many people at some point of time in their life cannot work for full-time, right? So how do we leverage their talent? The third is, there are going to be people who work on a service contract, which means they get the benefits, they'll do some minimum work, but the rest of it is really what they get paid based on what they do, right? And the fourth will be people who are freelancers, right? You have certain projects to be done, and how that is going to, they just do it for a certain price, right? Now, how does the organization define its organization structure, work breakdown structure, resourcing strategy in line with that, right? So if somebody could figure out, and this is something I've tried to do, no great success yet, that can you take a job description and break it using some algorithm into multiple assignments that could be done by different people rather than just one person, right? And this is something that I'm continuing to pursue, but that could revolutionize the workplace, right? I think so people can actually do stuff that they're good at, that they're interested in, rather than taking all of that comes together. I think the second portion is, how do you keep your culture alive, who you are, and change it a bit appropriately for this type of virtual distributed workforce for different 4 types of works, right? Today, culture is mainly meant for FTEs, right? How do you extend it to different, 4 types of workforce? I think this is going to be a big challenge. The third one is collaboration, right? The best work today, when you want to brainstorm, we all want to go, around a table or a whiteboard and do that type of brainstorming. And, the reviews, peer reviews, critical reviews, that type of work, how do you do it virtually now, right? So there are good tools available today, but they're still not fully primed to do that type of thing. And I think even in the last 1 year, people have made progress. So I think it's really, the dots will get connected in the future, right? Even the conferencing that we use, right, what we're using now, how can it become more experiential, right? And we all know VR and AR if it can get embedded into this, I think it'll create a much better and effective collaboration. I think the fourth thing is, how does the job of a leader and a manager change, right? So I believe that the real job of the leader is to build confidence and give hope. Be compassionate but not sympathetic, because providing sympathy doesn't solve anything, right? And really inspires the people and the team members to be courageous, right? So in a way, how can you be soft from outside and sure and confident from inside? And one of the things that inspires me the most is what Guru Gobind said, right? Can you become a Sant Senani, right? You are actually a sant, but you're willing to be a warrior for the right cause, right? And I'm also a student or a devotee of Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankar, and I'm very inspired by what he says a leader is, right? He says, walk like a king and be a perfect servant. So I think the job of a leader is to serve the people. And how do you do that in a virtual format rather than by, command and control? That is a part of the operations that needs to happen, but that should not be the body, right? That should not be the soul. And I think the fifth is, how do you do the most important things for employees, right? Which is meeting people, doing water cooler conversations, doing team building, and all of these soft things that are very valuable, right? A lot of, when you do this informal collaboration, that's where meaningful discussions happen and problems get solved and innovations happen. So how are we going to create that in a virtual environment? So I believe these will be the most important challenges for us as it becomes more and more virtual.
You have programs such as Shape the Future and Project Marketplace, which are platforms to promote diversity and collaboration. Can you talk about these programs and how they're playing a role in workforce transformation?
Absolutely. So let me talk about the Shape the Future, right? It was a program that we visualized to drive an innovation culture in the company. So in a way, it's like crowdsourcing. So we would give out a theme, it was a once in a year program, or we could give out a specific problem, or sometimes it would be completely open, right? Okay, what do you think could be a future product for us in the company, right? As open as that. And we would invite people, and over time we learned that rather than inviting individuals, we said at least 2 people, but maximum 4 people can submit the idea, right? We figured out that, when people come together, the quality of what happens improves, right? And then we would set up a system to, typically we would get about 400, 500 ideas. We will boil them down to about 25, and then get these people to make a pitch, right? Almost like a startup makes a pitch for funding. And then we shortlist, maybe 5, 6 ideas. And then we do a bit of a deep dive with them. We get them to talk to a VC, we get them to, visit actual startups, get them to interact with founders, get them coaching about how a startup works with, some of the best people who have done this before. And then they have to actually make a final pitch to say that if you get this idea, the company is going to give you funding, right? So that was the approach. And using that, today, about 3 ideas, when I say about means, actually there are 5, but 3 are fully funded, right? They're actually being, it's like future bets that we have. So this way we have been able to invite everybody to be a part of the future of the company and create an innovative culture, and also which is really helping us to solve everyday problems, not just like a moonshot, right? Project marketplace, is really what the name is. It's a marketplace for projects. So it's available, it's a platform, it's available to all employees in the company. And any manager can put out a project there, right? That he or she wants somebody to do in the company. And any employee can say, I want to do this project. So manager has a profile which they make, employee has a profile which they make, including what the expertise, this, that. And then we have an algorithm that matches, right? And then they can say, okay, I select you, you do the work. And it's basically volunteer work in addition to your day job. And then when you finish the work, the manager for whom you worked, it could be anybody in the company, right? And so the collision can happen from anywhere to anywhere. And you give, as a person who did the project, like a badge, 4-star, 3-star, 5-star, and likewise the manager can do. And it's secret in the sense nobody knows who gave what, but just like a score is available on, say, Amazon, right? For every buyer, every product that's available, right? So through this, there are 3 goals that we wanted to meet, right? One is, how do you create this culture of gig economy in the company through this, right? Number 2, when people want to develop new capabilities, they can do the learning, but they need a project to actually apply themselves, right? And actually convert that into a capability. And through this, it can happen because you're doing a real project, you're working with a real person, and you slowly, develop that. You have done, for example, a lot of work in the area of data science, right? So take, for example, somebody who has done OR or MIS type of, analysis, and this person wants to foray into data science, big data. So he or she learns, but nobody's going to have that person for big data. Say, what do you know? So say somebody has some small project, you do it once, and then the next time somebody else hires you because you have done at least one project, and you do 4 or 5 projects, and suddenly somebody is now willing to hire you as a full-time data science person in a particular role, right? So how do you create future pathways for people and develop talent and develop careers and solve the problem of what company needs in the future? And the third thing is, how do you create networks in the company, right? More people, many projects involve more than one person. These people could be people who have never worked before. They could be working with a manager who they don't know or have heard about. So how do you create, the more the network, the better the glue and the better the pathways, right? And this has become very popular in our company now. We have also integrated one of the world's largest freelance forums into this. So a manager can choose to do the project through employee volunteers, or if they are willing to pay, they can put the project there and they can pay for it. So we have done an enterprise integration. They don't have to worry about paying the bills. They go from their charge center, and basically they can convert their FT budget into an OPEX through which they can use freelancers. So it's still at an early stage. We have done maybe 50 projects like this, but that's going to become big. So how do you use the power of people and platform to bring a change, right? How do you create a small crack in the structure and slowly it'll keep becoming bigger, right? And you have to shatter the current structure to build a new structure, right? But you can't blast it, so how do you do it slowly is really what we're trying to do, Harpreet.
No, that's fascinating. It's great, very progressive that you are integrating to freelancing platforms and also this gig culture you're building. How big is that in terms of employee engagement? How many employees are currently volunteering on these projects?
So we launched the project marketplace about 5 years ago, and I think we've had about over 2,000 unique users in that now. And, for example, somebody says, I want to go into the data science example that I gave, right? So we have also integrated that with Tata Communications Learning Academy. So it starts pushing you data sciences programs that you could do to further your capabilities, right? And we have gamified it. and what badges you've learned, what level are you, all of that, right? And sometimes the points that you earn through gamification can be either used on a recognition and reward platform, right? You can buy stuff, or you can use it to do a really high level, high cost program to build your skills, right? So that's the way we're encouraging and creating a learning culture.
Let's talk about diversity in the Indian context. So in the US, over the past year with the murder of George Floyd, there is an increased sensitivity amongst HR leaders. And on this podcast, I've interviewed many CHROs who are talking about diversity and inclusion, especially given these events. So when we, in the US context, it means that, how do you look at pay equity for people of color? How do you ensure that you've got good representation within the company, so that the communities you serve, your employees look like those communities. So my question is, how do you think about diversity in the Indian context? Obviously in here you got debates around affirmative action, and in India you have debate around reservations, which is a similar concept. Can you reflect on that?
Yeah, so if I just look, we are a global company, Tata is a global organization, but if I look at only the India as the frame for answering this question. So first of all, and this is not for you, but a lot of other listeners, it, that India is like one country, but we have 20 national languages, and every 100 miles the food changes, the dialect changes, and there are perhaps 2,000 dialects. So India itself, how do you leverage that diversity, right? So I would say getting people to work for you in the locations that you are in, hiring the local people is one type of overall diversity. The second is, how do you get people from different states, different religions to work in different locations that you have, not where they originally lived, right? So that builds the second type of diversity. The third is a gender diversity, right? So we have a program called Winning Mix. How do you increase the percentage of women in the workforce, right? And the fourth is Tata Group has got a program called Tata Affirmative Action Program. And this is really focused on some of the portions of the society that were traditionally not allowed to grow when the caste system, etc., was very, very strong, right? So all Tata companies implement that program, not just in terms of hiring people from these communities, but also a lot of our CSR work is focused on providing entrepreneurship, education to the people of these impoverished and economically backward communities.
That's wonderful to hear. You're managing a changing culture, and you already talked about technology playing a big role in both education and how you are distributing work. So can you talk about how you see skills changing in this context? What are the skills of the future, and what do they look like?
So, I would begin by saying that, there are three types of skills, and very often we talk mostly about technical skills. I think future of work will require and sharpen the need for the softer skills, right? Which is how well can you collaborate virtually? Whether it's your team members, whether it is customers, whether it is with people who work for you, etc., right? This thing, is going to become very, very important, because what you can do in person is very hard to replicate virtually. If you look at most mails, it start by saying, Harpreet, but that's not how you behave when you meet in person. You shake hands, I am talking about the pre-COVID, and hopefully it'll come back, or you will even hug, you will smile. But all of that is missing in written communication, and that's why the written communication gets misunderstood most of the time, right? So how do you create this is really one big challenge. I think this is going to be a big skill, which is not emphasized, not even worrying about the future of work, right? I think the second one is, how do you deal with uncertainty, right? How do you deal with a lot of change is really going to become important, right? In this side of the skills. I think the second one is technical skills. I think anything digital, which means using software, using AI ML, using big data, using AR VR. I think everybody needs to learn what is this and how you can leverage this to change and make better what you're doing. Otherwise, somebody else will be doing and you'll be seeing the effect of that, right? So, do you want to be the cause or do you want to be the effect? Right? So, I think this is, can you create the tsunami, or the tsunami is going to hit you, right? I think this is one big change. The second is, wherever there is work which is repetitive, you're doing transactions, computing, that type of work, right? Compilation, all of that is going to go away in future. So if that is a part of your main job, figure out how you want to leapfrog quickly, because at some point of time that's going to go away, right? Some companies will tend to keep doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, but it's going to keep becoming smaller and smaller, right? You may still find a job, but then, you're going more towards the bottom rather than moving towards the top. So it depends on your aspirations, it depends on your ambition, it depends on what you'd like to be doing. So those, I think, are really the drivers for the skills of the future. And I would really wrap up by saying that, 20 years ago, the half-life of a skill was 20 years. So if you're going to work for 40 years, you learn something early on, in your professional education and early on in the job that takes you for 15, 20 years. Then you learn a little bit more, mostly on the job, and that can take you till the time you want to retire. Today, I think the half-life of a skill is 5 years. Now, it may look like only 1/4, but the effect of this can be that you can become obsolete very quickly, very early in your career. So, how do you increase, you can't increase the half-life, right? But how can you keep moving so that you keep getting new half-lives, which are long enough? It is really, I think, the way the talent strategy needs to be, and that's the way the personal strategy for each person needs to be.
Any parting words for our audience?
I would say self-leadership. Are you a leader for yourself, not for others? Do you have a destination? A river that has no destination becomes a pond. Are you depending too much on other people to appreciate you? Then you become dependent on them. Are you looking at some manager or some coach or some guide to tell you what you could do? And if they don't do a good job, then you're doomed. So how do you take responsibility for your life? I think all of us need to do more and more of that. And the second thing which I would say is what Mahatma Gandhi said. Can you become what you want the world to become? Can you become the best version of yourself? Really inspires me a lot.
Thank you, Aadesh. It's been a real pleasure, and hope to meet you soon again.
Absolutely. And if you come to Delhi, Whenever, would love to spend some time with you. And when I come to the East Coast next time, would love to catch up with you.